Welcome into another edition of Gold and Black Radio. I'm your host, Derek Schultz. Last week, a bit of a mixed bag for Purdue. They suffer a disastrous second half against Ohio State and ultimately end up with a surprising home loss to the Buckeyes, but then they rebound to thrash Michigan, a ranked Michigan team nonetheless, to earn a split of last week. And now it's Indiana. So 7 days to rest before the Hoosiers, which thankfully shouldn't require any extra rest or motivation. We're going to talk about it all with Brian Neubert next. But first, a thank you to our tremendous Gold and Black sponsors, including Purdue Federal Credit Union, a proud partner of Purdue Athletics and the official credit card for Purdue fans. Boiler up. East End Grill and Ripple and Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street, the perfect place for your next event. The Whitaker Inn, this Midwestern oasis, is perfect for a relaxing staycation or a weekend getaway. Escape from the ordinary at the Whitaker Inn. Our friends at the Sand Valley Resort, thanks for the swag bags, by the way, guys. The Friends of James Beard Chef Invitational at Sand Valley offers a weekend of culinary delights as 8 Midwest chefs showcase their skills. Enjoy exceptional food, friendly competition, and fundraising in a unique and unforgettable setting. As winter melts away, join us in 2025 for an unforgettable culinary journey with opportunities to taste and learn. Visit sandvalleypursuits.com/events/chef invitational to sign up. And finally, the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research. The Purdue Institute for Cancer Research has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Purdue brings together world-class Boilermaker scientists from across the university, conducting cutting-edge research that uncovers new ways to prevent, diagnose, and treat cancer. With your support, cancer research saves lives. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. Let's welcome on goldandblack.com columnist Brian Neubert, who joins me now and hopefully is at least a little bit warmer. I'm glad at the very least you got to sleep in your own bed for the last week, and we'll get to do so for the next week. So that's pretty nice considering the way that the previous 6 weeks have gone.
Yeah, the only problem is I'm sleeping too much, but that's okay. I wish it were warmer. That's probably why I can't get out of bed. I'm so comfortable.
I hear you. Yeah, this isn't the best time, I guess, to be stuck in like central Indiana. That's for sure, in the middle of January. I listened to your drive home podcast the other night because I have nothing better to do with my life. I listen to all your drive home podcasts.
That's exactly my demo.
Yeah. I don't think, as you said, I really don't think there's much reason to do like an in-depth rehash of a loss from a week ago, especially because, you know, not just the shows that involve me, but the shows that involve you and everybody else. I mean, we've kind of done it, right? Guess what? Purdue lost. They didn't play well. You can talk about it as a scheduling loss, a rest loss, whatever. I do think, actually, Brian, that I think you could kind of take it as the Michigan the win was one of those maybe scheduling losses for Michigan, in the fact that Michigan had to be thinking, oh, crap, at watching that game against Ohio State, knowing that that Purdue was going to be up for that game. Maybe Michigan doesn't win at Mackey anyway. It's an incredibly difficult place to win, but I really did feel like going into that game Friday night against a very talented Wolverines team that they definitely weren't winning after Purdue's performance on Tuesday. And I guess the program's in a good place when you're that confident in the team bouncing back instead of turning a surprising loss into a downward trend.
Yeah, no, Purdue clearly wasn't right in the second half against Ohio State. I am dead certain as to why that was. It will trigger a lot of my listeners, a lot of my readers if I rehash those reasons, but those reasons were very evident to anybody who watched Purdue for 7.5 games and then just observed this out-of-body experience that occurred in the second half against a mediocre Ohio State team. But to Purdue's credit, obviously it sharpened their focus. It got them in the right place mentally. It fixed whatever was broken after halftime for whatever reasons it was broken. And again, I am very confident in what those reasons were. Purdue had played 5 straight 3-day turnarounds, and the second to last one was Ohio State. The last one was Michigan. You saw what Ohio State did to the Michigan result. Had Purdue not lost the Ohio State game, Purdue beats Michigan. It does not beat the brakes off of Michigan the way it did. I don't think. That game was over 10 minutes in. But no, it just really illustrated what Purdue's capable of when Purdue's pissed. And the second half against Ohio State really agitated this team, really, really poked at their pride, really, really pissed off Braden Smith. And mad Braden Smith is probably better than any player in the country. it just proved that the 7.5 games prior to the second half against Ohio State is Purdue. And the second half against Ohio State was the outlier. And the 7.5 game Purdue, coupled with the Michigan game, that is clearly one of the best teams in the Big Ten, if not the best team in the Big Ten. And they are right there, in my opinion, in the Big Ten regular season championship race here. Michigan State's scheduling fiasco is ahead of it now. Purdue got its scheduling fiasco out of the way in January, and now Purdue's just going to need some help to get Michigan State some losses thrown on it.
Yeah, and Michigan State also isn't going to spend the next 10 games playing one top half Big Ten team like they just did. So, that's something.
Yeah.
And we talked about this, Brian. I mean, that's not me throwing shade at Michigan State. It's just the reality. I mean, the schedules are going to be imbalanced, and you're going to have some stretches where one team plays a meat grinder schedule and one team doesn't. You mentioned a PO'd Braden Smith. I think we all agree. Look, Purdue has had better as far as like more athletic and physically imposing players than Braden Smith in their history. But if you add up player plus competitor, is he one of the best combinations of those two things since you've been on the beat?
Yeah, he and Caleb Swan are the two guys who come to mind in terms of ability plus will. That's pretty good company to be in. But when you saw the Michigan game, that was Braden Smith just imposing his will. That is such a cliche nowadays that it kind of loses its meaning. But it was Braden Smith imposing his will on that game, literally from the first seconds of the game, because him jumping in front of that pass, stealing that ball, going the other way, and scoring set the tone for that whole game. And the energy Purdue did not have in the second half against Ohio State was extracted from everyone else by Braden Smith not having his normal energy, his normal mental sharpness, his normal physical sharpness, things like that. And then you saw the exact opposite of it against Ohio State, where his energy, his competitiveness, his will just oozed on everyone else. And that really set the tone for that whole game. And it was a Big Ten Player of the Year resume game for Braden Smith because it was all there.
I was, and I think I speak for Purdue fans too. It was very intrigued to see what Daniel Jacobson brought to the table, and obviously they lost him very early in the season, and so they really don't have any semblance of a shot blocking presence. I'm not a big Ewing theory guy, mostly because like Patrick Ewing is my Mickey Mantle, and I think I even have his bobblehead here, that's at my desk, so I don't subscribe to the Ewing theory at all. So I'm not trying to say that Purdue is better without Jacobson, because we don't know, right? We don't know what he would have brought to the table for this team. And clearly there are games where they could have benefited from having him. But from knowing that they can't funnel things to a shot blocking presence in the paint like they've been able to do in previous years, has that overcompensation made this defense stronger in your opinion, Brian? That just their ball denial against Michigan and the harassment of Michigan's guards, it was just incredible to watch.
It's funny you bring this up because right before we started recording here, I was transcribing for a big story I'm doing on Purdue's defense this year, what they changed, how they're doing it, the whole point of what they're doing, and how good they've been at it, and what a difference maker it's been for them. But they are winning with defense right now, and they had to change things in the offseason because they didn't have Ross-Ade behind them anymore. And you could always kind of take that for granted in terms of having that guy behind you. And maybe that led to some corner cutting here and there, but you have seen a razor sharp Purdue team in terms of trying to contain the dribble the best they can. Their help defense has been impeccable. Whether Daniel Jacobson would have been that guy who would have played the Edey role in this defense, I don't know. I do have my doubts because at the end of the day, he is 7'4". He would have blocked a lot of shots, but he also was still 215 pounds when he first took the floor for this team, and he wasn't ready physically. It was going to be a ready or not type of situation. He would have struggled through some things. He would have helped them in some ways, but he would have been exposed in some others, most likely. Now the best case scenario is he comes back next year full strength at 240, 250 pounds, and you really have something. But in the meantime, they have had to acclimate to not having a presence at the rim, not having any shot blocking whatsoever, really. I think Camden Heidi's going to end up as like one of their top 2 or 3 shot blockers just based on help side stuff. Braden Smith has blocked up all of 5'10". Braden Smith has blocked a couple jumpers this year, so he's going to end up there too. And that's just not reality. And Purdue's done a really good job protecting the rim by not letting people near it. They've done a good job trapping on the perimeter, forcing turnovers, really pressuring, playing together. And the rim protection is being done 15 feet from the rim. It's kind of the same thing, just very different. But no, Purdue's been great defensively. They have been, to be honest with you, since Big Ten play resumed, they've been the best defensive team in the Big Ten. Probably they've been one of the best and most effective defensive teams in college basketball. I'm quite certain, because you can't get a whole lot better. And the defense is being made better by the offense not turning the ball over. And the offense is being made way better by the fact that it is getting these quick change opportunities, because the defense is forcing so many turnovers. This has never been, not since like the mid-2000s, has this been a high-pressure defense built to force turnovers. The game has changed. Purdue changed with it. Purdue had to acclimate to having a really big guy on the floor all the time. So their approach to defense became more containment-minded versus proactive pressure creation as it used to be. And as a result, it just didn't force many turnovers. Now it's achieving both ends. It's containment-minded, but it's also creating so many mistakes from opponents that it's generating really high-volume turnovers. And when you have Braden Smith and you're able to get out in the open floor, you're able to push the tempo offensively, that is as good of an offensive setup as you can possibly have. Purdue's really capitalized on that. 30 points off turnovers against Ohio State, 29 against Michigan. That is absolute gold for them. They're going to be really hard to beat when that's the case. That said, they lost a game 2 games ago when they had 30 points off turnovers, which is one of the biggest statistical oddities I think I've ever seen in a college basketball game Purdue played in.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, it's a combination of the lack of rest and one of those nights, plus just playing poorly. I think it was very much so the perfect storm, and that's generally what it requires for a team to win at Mackey Arena, is that they need to have those kind of conditions to create that so-called perfect storm. Purdue and IU next. And I think it goes without saying, Brian, a lot of Purdue fans pay attention to IU and vice versa, right? It's a rivalry. That's usually the case. What do you see there? Why can't a team that they clearly have some talents, why can't they figure it out? Because it just feels like, I don't want to get in maybe a whole thing about, the last 30 years of Indiana basketball, but it does feel like it's been like 25, 30 years of essentially outside of a few respites in there, essentially the same thing down there in Bloomington.
Well, they can assemble all the talent they want, and that's part of the problem. Is I think they're too hung up, and this starts with their following. It really, really does. They get so caught up in 5 stars and NBA players, and then those guys being big man on campus, that there's this star factor down there that leads to you getting talented guys. But then you have these staffs that don't build rosters very well. And there's probably, truth be told, there's probably some reticence on their part to go get a rando role player to put in between these guys, because it's such a star-driven culture down there that it just has been a toxic mix every year for like the last 20. And it worked in pockets for Tom Crean. Mike Woodson's record is not that bad, but, the expectations down there are, you have students booing Mike Woodson, wanting him to get fired, when the last time Indiana could reasonably expect to win every game it played was outside of most of those kids' lifetimes, right? I mean, you are chasing ghosts. It's very similar to Nebraska basketball, or I'm sorry, Nebraska football, where you're holding modern teams to a standard that ain't coming back. anytime soon. You tried to do the Kentucky-like thing there for a while by going out and having your shoe company get you players that theoretically would be your 5-star stud, and then you never built good teams around them. Again, the best team Indiana's had in the last maybe generation was Cody Zeller, Yogi Ferrell, right? And a couple of under-recruited guys that Tom Crean and his staff helped turn into good players. And that's what Indiana should be doing, but they're so caught up in, the star culture, and they're so reliant on their NIL just going out and doing it fantasy draft style that it's just, you could have predicted this year because it's happened every year under Mike Woodson, pretty much, where your mercenary star, who's only there for a very short time, commits to a number, not to a program, and is out there playing for himself. And they just don't build good substantive teams around them. And it's the fundamental difference between Purdue and Indiana. And it's the reason that Purdue has been way ahead of them for a good decade now. Obviously Indiana had some success against them a couple years ago when they probably shouldn't have. Purdue had clearly the better team. But Purdue had some youth on those teams, and that youth showed up. And, that's just something that's going to happen every now and then. But Indiana is just, they haven't been able to get out of their own way. They make the same mistakes over and over again, and the standard they're being held to by their fans. And once you've lost the fans down there, you're not getting them back. History has told us that time and time again. And I'm not saying that as a defense of Mike Woodson. I don't think he's done a very good job down there. I think their collective has done their recruiting for them. And I think that that's a dangerous mix and a dangerous modern reality that a lot of teams are falling victim to. But they're just not doing it the way Indiana basketball was built on. And that's continuity, that's teamwork, it's fundamentals, things like that. This is a mixtape program down there now. And when they're desperate and they're throwing money all over the place, you become a really easy mark on the transfer market. So when Umar Ballo, Miles Rice, and Kanan Carlisle all basically are committed to IU before they even visit, that means they committed to a number. They didn't commit to a school. They didn't commit to a coach. They committed to a number. They committed to whatever Indiana offered them before they'd even gotten to substantively know one another, the coaches and the player alike. And it's just a really toxic mix, and it just hasn't worked. And it's not surprising when it doesn't work because it's not an ideal situation. So that's a long answer to a short question, but they just have to get it figured out down there if they want to be good again. There's no reason they can't be good again. I don't think that I don't think their days of year-to-year national prominence, their national championship years are coming back anytime soon. And I think people need to accept that. I think they need to understand that things are different now. And until they do, you're going to keep firing their coach every 3 years, or every 4 years, the way they've been doing for the last 10 years. And they don't need to find their Bob Knight. They need to find their Matt Painter. They need to find stability. They need to find somebody who's just going to coach and not have any drama. They got to stop the drama down there. There's just perpetual drama down there. And I think they just need to kind of keep their heads down, work, recruit the right types of kids. Don't worry about being big man on campus. Don't worry about how you're going to be received in the frat houses on Saturday night, stuff like that. Don't worry about TikTok and, stuff like that. They've not recruited the right type of substance for many, many years now. Purdue has, and that's why Purdue has been, kind of head and shoulders above them for the majority of the time since, Tom Crean finally got them winning again. Tom Crean early on or later in his tenure got the best of Purdue quite a bit, but ever since then it's been all Purdue. Archie Miller didn't beat him. Mike Woodson has got Purdue twice, but it's been pretty much all Purdue since then.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think think the days of them being on the level with Kansas, Duke, Carolina are gone forever, but I still don't see any reason why they can't be Illinois or Wisconsin, and they haven't even really been up to that standard in most years. And I think that causes a lot of frustration, and it's got to frustrate their fans too. That one thing, kind of a calling card for Matt Painter is that a lot of the guys that he recruits, the guys that stay, get better. And
Yes.
even when you look at somebody, Trey Galloway kind of fits the old mold of an Indiana player, right? Indiana kid, Culver Academy, I think, if I remember right. Trey Galloway he's the same player basically that he was like 2 years ago. I mean, you could play, you can give Trey Galloway 17 years of eligibility and he's just a guy. And that's something else that I think they've run into down there as well. But
I would argue that Trey Galloway's not as good a player as he was when he was a freshman. Remember what a problem he was to play against when Purdue went down there and lost with Jaden Ivey? When Jaden Ivey got hurt right before the game, Trey Galloway was a grinder. I mean, he was the ultimate substance guy in that game. I thought he was a huge difference maker in that game. And deep down, he's an Indiana high school basketball coach's kid. He grew up in this state. He grew up as a competitor. And what has that gotten them since his freshman year? He shouldn't be one of your best players. He should be a role player.
Yeah.
He hasn't really gotten better. They haven't put shooters around him inexplicably. One of the other
failings.
He's kind of the face of their whole TikTok culture. I don't want to sound like Dockich here, because kids are kids and they are allowed to have fun. But it does seem like there's a certain vanity to that program that has existed for quite a while now. And that's the opposite of what Purdue has been. Trey Galloway would be a better player at Purdue than he turned out to be at Indiana. I'm quite certain of that. And that's just me spitballing there. That's just me guessing. We'll never know. Jaden Ivey took this scholarship that, he had an opportunity to take. I think he wanted to go to Indiana all along anyway. It wouldn't have mattered. Once Archie Miller finally decided to offer both he and Anthony Leal at the same time, I think he was getting both of those guys. So it's completely a moot point on how things would have turned out for Trey Galloway at Purdue. But I think he'd have been better at Purdue than he's been at IU.
Yeah, I just think, like anything else, there's a standard, there's the realistic standard, and I think sometimes people on the outside say, well, IU fans aren't being realistic. And to me, it's, these results like 5-5 in the Big Ten or, finishing mid-pack Big Ten, struggling to make the tournament, like that's unacceptable. Like you asking them to be Kansas. Okay. They're not going to be Kansas, but Indiana should absolutely be a slam dunk NCAA tournament team virtually every year with all of the advantages that they have and the facilities and the NIL money and the history and everything else. And they can't do it. They just haven't been doing that for a long time now. And that's a big problem. But
you put it well when you said that the days of being Duke and Kansas are gone, but there's no reason you can't beat Wisconsin or Iowa. Not to say they're not Iowa. I mean, that was just the first name that popped in my head. There's no reason you can't be Michigan. There's no reason you can't be Ohio State. Right now, they're not that. They're just the perpetually underachieving team that gets its fans all excited with its fantasy draft off seasons. It's summertime national championships. And then they fall in the same trap every year. This is the year. This is the year. This is the year. I'm a Yankees fan, so I do the same thing. It's kind of human nature, but I think that it's a little more volcanic down there. It's a little more explosive because the shock and awe of them getting housed by Louisville in Atlantis this year is probably, even if that was covered up a little bit by football, it's just the expectations just go crazy in the offseason. And then when it goes bust real ugly because the expectations have inflated things to the point that it's really combustible.
But they're still not dead yet, right? 5-5, and a win at Mackey would breathe new life into their season. And I'm sure Matt Painter's been hammering that all week long. It's a rivalry game. Braden Smith's from here. Fletcher Lawyer's from here. Trey Kaufman-Rent's from here. It's a roster full of kids that are Caleb First. Roster full of kids that are from here. So I don't think that they're going to overlook IU in a rivalry game. But clearly, a runaway win could maybe finally be the KO blow on a season for Indiana that just feels like it's really teetering, especially after last week's losses to Northwestern and just the way they lost to Maryland down the stretch where they came all the way back and it looked like they were back in control and then ultimately ended up falling short. But Friday night, Mackey Arena should be loaded and should be a really fun atmosphere as the IU game always is. And Brian will have all the coverage right here at goldenblack.com. Thanks, my man. We'll talk again next week.
No problem, Derek. Thanks, man.
It's our pal Brian Neubert, goldenblack.com columnist, and that is our show for today. Thanks so much for joining us, and thank you to the Purdue Federal Credit Union, the official credit card for Purdue fans. East End Grill and Ripple & Company, two distinctive bistros across the street from one another on the far end of Main Street in Lafayette. The Whitaker Inn for unparalleled comfort and cuisine. Visit the Whitaker Inn. Sand Valley Resort. Join us for the Friends of James Beard Chef Invitational at Sand Valley, an unforgettable culinary journey with opportunities to taste and learn. Visit sandvalleypursuits.com/events/chef invitational to sign up. And the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research, which has a history of innovation and one goal for the future: defeat cancer. Join the fight and donate to the Purdue Institute for Cancer Research today. And of course, as always, I always end the show like this. Don't forget to sign up to become a member for the best Purdue coverage at goldenblack.com. You get Brian, you get Tom Dienart, and all the happenings with football, which is a 24/7, 365-day thing with the portal and National Signing Day, and pretty soon the spring game will be here, and thank God for that. It won't be 10 degrees anymore. Carm, Alan, me, everybody over at goldenblack.com and all of our friends at Knucklehead Central. By becoming a subscriber, you can go through all of those message board threads and go right down the rabbit hole and hang out and talk Boilermaker sports right here at goldandblack.com. We'll recap the Indiana game next week, but until then, we will see you next time right here on Gold and Black Radio.